History remembers the headlines, we find the bylines. This is the unsung. To understand true courage, one must look at the year 1940. While millions were fleeing the advancing shadow of the Third Reich, one man was walking toward it. Witold Pilecki was not a man of chaos. He was a husband, a father of two, and a veteran of the Polish-Soviet War. But as Poland fell under the dual occupation of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, Pilecki realized that conventional warfare was over. A new, darker kind of resistance was required. In the autumn of 1940, rumors began to swirl in Warsaw about a new prison camp in the town of Auschwitz renamed Auschwitz by the Germans. To the outside world, it was a black hole. No one knew what happened behind those electrified fences. Was it a transit station? A labor camp? Or something more sinister? Pilecki proposed a plan that stunned his commanders in the secret Polish army. He would infiltrate the camp as a prisoner to act as their eyes and ears. It remains the only recorded instance in history of a man voluntarily entering a concentration camp. Today, we tell the story of the volunteer for hell. On September 19, 1940, Pilecki put his plan into motion. Carrying a false identity card for Tomasz Serafivski, he purposefully stepped into the path of a Nazi Łapanka, a massive, random street roundup of civilians in Warsaw. He was beaten, tossed into a truck, and then loaded into a cattle car. For 2 days, he stood in darkness among terrified strangers. When the doors finally opened, he was greeted by the blinding floodlights of Auschwitz. He watched as guards murdered prisoners for being too slow. He felt the cold iron of the number 4,859 being branded into his skin. But where others saw an end, Pilecki saw a beginning. His mission had officially commenced. He began to observe the camp's layout, the guard rotations, and the psychological state of his fellow captives. He realized that to survive, and to succeed, he would need to build a shadow army within the very heart of the Nazi death machine. The organizational genius of Pilecki was his union of military organizations, or ZA. He knew that in a place where informers were everywhere, trust was a luxury. He built the ZAO on a system of 5 cells of 5 men who knew each other but did not know the identities of other cells. This prevented the entire network from collapsing if one man was caught and tortured. By 1941, Pilecki's network had grown to hundreds of prisoners, including doctors, clerks, and even kitchen staff. They managed to accomplish the impossible. They stole SS uniforms, smuggled in extra rations for the sick, and even managed to build a rudimentary radio transmitter using scavenged parts. Through this radio, Pilecki broadcast the first ever data on the camp's death toll to the Polish resistance in London. He was the first to describe the industrialization of death, the gas chambers, and the crematoria. His Witold's reports reached the highest levels of Allied command, but the truth was so horrific that many in London and Washington simply refused to believe it. As the years passed, the camp shifted from a brutal prison for political dissidents into an extermination center for the Jewish people. Pilecki watched as thousands arrived daily, only to vanish into the chimneys hours later. The psychological toll was immense. He saw his closest friends executed. He suffered from typhus and pneumonia. Yet he continued to recruit. He even managed to infect SS guards with typhus-carrying lice as a form of biological sabotage. By early 1943, Pilecki realized that no Allied air raid or rescue mission was coming. The Gestapo was closing in on his organization. They began arresting ZAO members, and Pilecki knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered Tomasz Serafivski was an intelligence officer. If he stayed, the truth of Auschwitz would die with him. He decided he had to do something no one thought possible. He had to leave. On the night of April 26, 1943, during a night shift at the camp's bakery located outside the main wire, Pilecki and 2 companions made their move. They had spent weeks observing the bakery's guard patterns. As the guards were distracted, they cut the telephone lines, overpowered a sentry, and bolted into the pitch-black woods. They fled under a hail of gunfire, navigating by the stars. Pilecki traveled on foot for hundreds of miles, dodging Nazi patrols and sleeping in haystacks, until he finally made contact with the Polish Home Army. He submitted a massive report, begging for an attack on the camp to liberate the prisoners. However, the Home Army deemed such a mission a suicide pact without Allied air support. Pilecki had escaped hell, but he found a world that was still too blind or too afraid to stop it. Pilecki's story should have ended as a war hero's triumph, but history had one final, cruel turn. After fighting in the Warsaw Uprising of 1944 and surviving a POW camp in Germany, he returned to Poland. But the Nazis had been replaced by a Soviet-backed communist regime. Pilecki, ever loyal to the legitimate Polish government in exile, began gathering intelligence on Soviet atrocities. In 1947, he was captured by the communist secret police. He was tortured for months, his fingernails pulled out, his ribs broken. He told his wife that Auschwitz was just a game compared to what the communists were doing to him. In a sham show trial, he was labeled a traitor and a spy. On May 25, 1948, Witold Pilecki was executed with a single shot to the back of the head. His name was scrubbed from the history books for 40 years, his burial site left unmarked. It wasn't until the fall of the Iron Curtain that his records were unsealed. Witold Pilecki reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important. He walked into the dark by choice, so that the rest of us could live in the light. What do you think is the most remarkable part of Pilecki's story? Could you have maintained your resolve inside the wire? Share your thoughts below. Comment brave if you find his sacrifice inspiring. Subscribe to the Unsung.